Mexico. What I'd like people to try and envision while we're talking about this, Albuquerque is just this huge city smack in the middle of New Mexico, which most of New Mexico is just high desert. And 30 to 40 miles south of Albuquerque, there's this little bump, this little mountain range, and this stone is in there in the middle of that mountain range at about 6,500 feet or so elevation. And it's written in what appears to be, according to many people who've looked at it over the last 70 years or so, Paleo-Hebrew. Now, you got to ask yourself, what is Paleo-Hebrew doing out in the middle of the desert in New Mexico up on the side of a mountain on a boulder? So we have several hypotheses, Aaron, that I've seen. One involves the Phoenicians because of some of the writing on the stone. One involves the Samaritans because of the difference in the translation, especially at the beginning of the Decalogue. And one of them, how did the Mormons get involved in this? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I don't think the Samaritans had anything to do with it. It could be a remote possibility, and I don't rule it out completely. But to me, the evidence don't point to the Samaritans. Now, the Phoenicians, there may be a connection with the Phoenicians, but you have to understand the Phoenicians were masters of sailing the sea. If anyone could get over here, it would be the Phoenicians. But that would totally go against history as we know it and as it's taught. The Phoenicians, of course, were looking for the land of Ophir, which is, what they call the land of gold. And some say that the land of Ophir was around Los Lunas, New Mexico area. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true, but there was a translation that was done early on by other people who actually wasn't just a poor translation, it was a wrong translation of, these lost sailors being, lost at sea and they were abandoned, and it gives this whole story of their journey and how they got there and why they were abandoned. And some say it was Navajo, it's tied into Navajo language, and none of that is true. The Phoenician aspect, though, is quite interesting because the Rio Grande goes right up through there, and a tributary to the Rio Grande is the Rio Porco. The Rio Porco is a very it's a small river, but back at that time it may have held quite a bit of water. But there's a lot of switchbacks in the river. I just don't know that they could have got a ship up in there. I think they probably could have got canoes up in there, but they could have gone that way. It's all speculation and circumstantial. There's no other evidence, however, other than the inscription itself being in Paleo-Hebrew, because after all, the Phoenicians actually used Paleo-Hebrew language. So some say it was a lost sailor from the Phoenician fleet, but there's no other evidence pointing to Phoenicians in that area. Not to say that there's not. Well,
I was just going to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, not to say that there's not Phoenician evidence and found in North America. There actually is, but just not in this particular area.
Well, my question would be, why would a lost Phoenician merchant or sailor get up on top of a 6,500-foot cliff and carve specifically the Ten Commandments? Why would he do that?
Well, that's interesting. I don't think they did. I don't think it's Phoenician. Now, there's some who believe that it is Phoenician. It is 3,000 years old, but there's just no evidence to support it. I would love for it to be 3,000 years old and, a lost sailor, but the translation doesn't bear out to that particular, story. And number two, there's no other evidence. Number three, there's no occupation evidence of that area. Somebody was through there, but there's no long-term occupational evidence. And there's just no reason to be out there. I don't think anyone could really live out there very long, except for probably the Native Americans, the Anasazis, the Pueblos, etc. They did it, and there's certainly ample evidence for them being around there. But if you're going to push that back 3,000 years, that's going to be very hard to do. You asked about the Mormon influence, Laurel, and some people say, well, the Battalion of Mormon went through there. It's about that same time period, and they're right. It was about the same time period, and the Battalion of Mormon did actually go through that area, but not through that specific area. They went through the general area. But it's interesting because I wanted to know if they had anything to do with this, and there was some speculation, of course, involving the authorship of the stone. So, of course, we want to know the answer to the question, who wrote this? Is it the Mormons, and why did they write it? So those are questions that I sought to answer, and basically, it's the Mormon community said, hey, we're interested in this stone. Back in the 1950s, they sent out the Archaeological Society of Brigham Young University from Utah, and the team critically examined the stone. And in 1954, they published their findings. And here's what they said. This is the Mormon Church, basically, the Archaeological Society for the Mormons, said that because in 1954 it lacked any characteristics of it being Mormon, number one. Number two, there's no archaeological evidence in their documentations to say that they put it there. The Mormons were very meticulous in keeping documents and records, and it's not located in their archives. Number three is that it lacked a patina on the stone. And remember, back in 1948, this guy, when he took that picture, he scratched off that patina. And so when they got to it in 1950s, they said, "Oh, you know what? Even the patina is removed, but it's not ours." It basically is what their conclusions were. And they published on this in an article in 1954, and they just dismissed it. They said, it's not us, it's not ours. Now, if it had been, the Mormons would have claimed it, and that's what they went out there to do, but they did not. The Smithsonian Institution also in 1951 sent out a survey, and they stated definitively that there is no connection between the archaeology of the New World and that stone connection with Mormons. So they even said, and that was Dr. Roberts over at the Smithsonian Institution said that. I had a guy who emailed me, and he said, "You know what? I'm a Mormon. I've been raised in the Mormon church." He said, and I live out there. He said, "I've never heard of this stone." He said, "I've never heard of it. I would have heard about it in my community, within my circles, and I've never heard about it." He said, "I'm going out there to see what this thing is." He emailed me. He said, "You know what? I went out there. I looked at it." He said, "I read everything on it. I dug in the church archives." He said, "This is not related to Mormons. This is not the Battalion of Mormon coming through." And even he said it has no relation to the Mormon influence that came through in that time period. Sure, they came through in the same time period, but they had nothing to do with it. It's not theirs. And he really confirmed what the Smithsonian Institution has said, and even the Archaeological Society of Brigham Young University said in the 1950s.
I want to give a few references here, Aaron. Just take a second. Of course, you're listening to Epic Voyages Radio online at www.inceptionradionetwork.com, and we're talking with Dr. Aaron Judkins, who is a biblical archaeologist, and he has firsthand, with his own two eyes, studied this Decalogue stone, which is out in the middle of the desert south of Albuquerque in New Mexico. But I want to give a couple of references here. Aaron has some really good information on his WordPress blog, and I'm putting it in the chat room right now. It's www.manversusarchaeology. That would be man vs like Victor Sam, manvsarchaeology.wordpress.com. And if you scroll down his initial page there, you will find a whole article about the let's see how you start that about the. It's a very good article called "The Mystery of the Decalogue Stone." I'm guessing it's just a little before halfway down his initial web page there when you click in. Also, I want you to know that he has a documentary online. I'm putting that in the chat room right now on YouTube, and you can find that by typing in capital letter X Indiana Jones 1. So that's no spaces. X Indiana Jones, the numeral 1, when you go to YouTube. And he has videos. I think you have a DVD of the documentary there that you have a link for. Is that right, Aaron?
Yeah, if they go to my website, aaronjudkins.com, they can go and see where they can get information on getting the documentary. It's very reasonably priced. We want people just to get the information out. We want people to see it. And it's over an hour long, and we got some scholars that go out with us. And it's quite interesting. I think people would really find this intriguing once they see the documentary and us actually shooting on locale. And if people go to the blog, there's a poll that I would encourage people to take. Is the Los Lunas Decalogue Stone authentic? And I want people to go in that poll. Right now, Laurel, the poll is showing 50% affirmative that the evidence is clear for it being authentic.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so your poll is on the WordPress.com blog, right?
Yeah, manversusarchaeology.wordpress.com.
Okay.
If they go to the Mystery of the Decalogue Stone in the search, it'll pull up, and right towards the bottom, you'll see that poll. And we want people to go on there because your input's valuable on this. We want to know what you think.
And then Aaron's own website is www.aaronjudkins, AARONJUDKINS.com. And that's where you can get more information about the DVD. And then again, if you go to YouTube and type in X Indiana Jones followed by the number 1, all no spaces, you will hook up with actually, Aaron has quite a few videos there. He has some on giants. He has some on the Nephilim. He's got this one about the Los Lunas stone. He has quite. How many would you say you've got online there, Aaron?
Oh, I don't know. Probably 25 videos, maybe. But they're quality, videos in these areas. I interview other people. We go on location. And we just talk about these things. And, my interest has been, Laurel, in forbidden archaeology, the mysteries of the past, things that mainstream archaeologists don't want to touch. That's the stuff I like to go after because I want to know the truth about these things. Number one, why don't I hear about these things? How come they're not mainstream? How come the public's not made aware of these? How come it's buried evidence and suppressed? And that's really what started intriguing me on this whole journey is why is this evidence being suppressed? And I wanted to know the truth of the matter because, listen, if giants are true, there's a lot of history that's wrong. We need to know the answers to these things. Is there evidence confirming, the Nephilim? So there's just all kinds of questions that archaeologists won't touch. And it just baffles me because they're worried about protecting their social stance in the universities there. And listen, there are good reputable